Good afternoon, CoMotion. Is everybody having a great CoMotion conference? Yes. Well, whatever you've seen already, prepare to be wowed, because this is an extremely spicy panel full of very spicy, interesting thought leaders in the area of big data solutions to mobility and other challenges. And so without further ado, I'm going to start at the far end and ask our panelists to introduce themselves by name and their areas of responsibility at their business or their agency, and to tell us the most interesting thing in the field that comes to mind at the moment as a lead-off question. Starting with Francisco.
No pressure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to our session. My name is Francisco Ramirez. I am Chief Architect for State and Local Government at Red Hat. For those of you that don't know, Red Hat is an open source enterprise software company. My colleagues are right around the corner. Please stop by. I have responsibility for all of North America, so I have all state and local government. I am part of a team that covers the public sector within the United States, expanding globally for us. In terms of the most interesting thing is, that was, Mitch, that's what you wanted me to focus on?
The most interesting or exciting thing that just comes to mind off the top of your head.
So I'm not going to say AI, but I did say AI. But for me, it's more around data. So when you look at a lot of the emerging technology that's taking place, when you're looking at what some of the innovations are required to move the industry forward without access to good data, and some of our colleagues will talk about that today, that's going to be very difficult. And if you're starting to look at implementing things like artificial intelligence, it becomes even more critical.
All right, but before I move on to Art, I need to follow up, because I wanted something exciting. And usually when people think of something exciting, they don't, their first thing isn't data. Okay. So make data spicy for us.
Put a little kimchi on it.
Put a little kimchi on the data.
And this is a very good place to do that. Spicy data?
Spicy data. What is exciting you about data?
So I think why it's so, this is funny. I got to be careful with the audience. The spicy portion of this is that it's been around for a very long time. I would argue that it's been ignored for a very long time, but it is becoming the new hotness. Is that spicy enough, you Mitch?
I like it. All right. Art, tell us about yourself and your work and what is exciting you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Artie Mandel. I am the Director of Government Affairs for the Port of Los Angeles, otherwise known as City of Los Angeles Harbor Department. We operate down in San Pedro Bay, about 25, 30 miles south of here. And we're a City of Los Angeles department, and for the last 25 years, we've been the #1 container port in the Western Hemisphere. Last year, we had our second busiest year on record. We moved 10 million containers through our 7 container terminals, and are responsible, along with our neighbors right to the south of us, the Port of Long Beach, to combine the San Pedro Bay Ports Complex, about 3 million direct and indirect jobs, not just in the Southern California 5-county area, but all across the country rely on the goods that are moved in and out of the ports of LA and Long Beach. And what's most exciting right now is really the lessons I think that we've learned from the supply chain crisis, and how the industry is really adopting new technologies in order to make sure something like that doesn't happen again. So I mentioned last year was our second busiest year. Our busiest year was 2022, and everybody knows that was our busiest year because, along with folks in the audience, you were all waiting for your stuff for a really long time because it was stuck on a dock somewhere, maybe down at LA and Long Beach, because we had 100 ships backed up off of our shores and anchored there. So not only were people not getting their goods, but we were also having an increased environmental impact on our communities from all those ships running their engines. And it really was, we recovered in a lot of ways, but it was a failure in a lot of ways that we're trying to internalize the lessons and how do we stop something like that from happening. Data has really been a big part of how we're doing that. And that's why last year, in our second busiest year on record, we didn't have a single ship backed up. Everybody can still click, buy and get next day shipping on Amazon, and it comes right to you. And a lot of the reason we've been able to do that is not just because we've gotten better operationally at what we do, but just because we've internalized and adapted and built new technology systems using things like data and AI that are helping us serve our customers.
Well, getting your stuff quicker is spicy, for sure. We're going to come back to the question of success after the introductions. But Mike, tell us what's going on with you.
Sure. Great to see you all today. Thanks very much for the opportunity. My name is Mike Potter. I'm the head of commercial at Appiway. No surprise from my accent. I'm from the UK. That's where our main focus is. But I'm not part of a reformed boy band from the 90s. As we're sat on stools on a stage, it doesn't look like we're about to stand up and do a key change at any moment.
We're going to get to that with the next question.
Yeah, we have set that up, have we, Mitch? Excellent. So in terms of what Appiway do, we effectively create digital twins of the road network. The rules of the road, be it speed limits, be it parking, curbside management and things like that, going to be taking part in the walking tour as well later on to kind of realise what that looks like and how that can benefit cities, how it can benefit citizens, how it could benefit ports even further as well in terms of understanding what that data looks like. For me, given that I'm close to day and day out, it's quite difficult to pick just one thing that is exciting. But for me, the fact that people are talking about curbside management now as a real thing and something that is actually an opportunity to go and address and go and make the most of, maximise revenue, increase compliance at the curbside, be it from enforcement or from a reliability point of view, reallocating that curbside to use cases that might otherwise not have been a thing. So only down the road from here, we've got businesses that are taking up curb space to sit out. As an economic generator, it's not preventing revenue, it's encouraging revenue, encouraging more people into towns and cities. So that's what excites me at the moment.
Excellent. And if I forget to ask, just at some point, let's talk about the analogies between downtown curbs, seaport berths, and airport gates, because I think that there's a lot of there are a lot of interesting parallels there. Kome.
Hi. Oh my gosh, it's loud.
It's got to be loud. We're competing with the whole.
My name is Kome Ajise. I'm the executive director of the Southern California Association of Governments, otherwise known as SCAG. SCAG is the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Southern California region, and we cover 6 counties and 191 cities. I definitely am not going to qualify to be on a boy band the way I look. I know that. What we do at SCAG is really mostly to enable our cities and counties to do well what they already do, and data comes into play there. I don't know if it's spicy or not, but for us, we think it's spicy because we do it every day and we're excited about what we do. I think in the course of our work over the next year, we're working on something you all might be aware of. That's the Olympics. We're working on travel demand management for the Olympics. And there's a lot of implication for data in the Olympics, and especially as we see the potential for AI and big data, the convergence of AI and big data allows us to begin to see the potential for how we might be in the process of developing travel demand management for both people and for freight, begin to actualize the potential for a digital twin and instant analysis because of the real-time data potential. And so we think that's spicy. It doesn't really need any jalapeno on it. It's just spicy by itself.
No, I like it. So to me, the most mind-blowing thing that I've experienced recently was yesterday when I took an automatic vehicle with no driver from the west side over to downtown, and how well and smoothly that worked. And and it was really mind-blowing. And what I loved is being able to look at it in real time and see what good time we were making, because the original estimate was it took 15 minutes less than the original estimate. I don't know if that's how they're setting it up, so that you're always impressed with their speed. But it leads me to my next question, which is, because you're all in various ways, you're all thought leaders in this area, and I want to know, looking forward, how long until we have human error proof system for getting people and things from place to place? Where are we in that process? Are we at at day one, or are we 5 years away? What do you think? Why don't we start with you?
Well, I don't think we're in day one. I think we're past day one, and we're far along in the process to understand that this is a potential. And for us, one of the areas that makes the most sense is in predictive modeling for safety. Now, many of you might be familiar with the fact that when we do safety analysis on the system, on the transportation system, we always look back to see where crashes have occurred and what corrections you could make. And that typically, worst case scenario, the lag could be 36 months in terms of data that you're working on to solve a problem today, which might be implemented over the next 6, 7, maybe even 10 months of implementation. And so that lag is it's unconscionable at the point we're in today. So I would argue that we're beyond just day one. I think we're farther down the road. We're beginning to see the potential of understanding the predictive capacity of the technology that's out there. And we're beginning to make that available to our cities where they can make decisions on a more urgent basis because you could see data on near misses that occurred only hours or days ago. So we're getting to that point. Now we're still going to be, I think there's still going to be human error involved because we don't have 100% automation on the vehicle side yet. We don't have 100% information available to us in terms of predictive data. But I think the convergence it's getting narrower and narrower to where we will get to a point where maybe in the next few years get to where we're error-free. I think one thing to keep in mind is we just have not invested as much in it. And one of the efforts that's underway, at least at the national level, I happen to sit on the board of the Intelligent Transportation Systems of America. They are working very actively, that group is working very actively to create a digital infrastructure component to federal funding. One would think, given the United States, we should have been further down that road already, but we are used to funding highways and bridges, and we just don't know how to fund the soft technology that actually is more powerful in getting us to error-free.
All right, I want to save that topic for another question, if I can remember to ask it. If not, somebody can just volunteer the answer anyway. But let's move down. Mike, what about you? What do you think in terms of how far are we away from human-proof mobility?
Human-proof mobility is a huge thing to look at. In terms of where we're looking to get to, definitely we're miles down the road from day one in terms of where we are, in terms of where we are now. But in terms of trying to think about where we might be in 5 years' time, as you suggested earlier on, I think sometimes it's useful to look back and think where we were 5 years ago and where we've come from. Your experience that you had just this morning or yesterday, I think it was, with Waymo, you wouldn't have had that 5 years ago, but you're having that now. So we're definitely on that on the route to that. But we've been making incremental progression for however many years. If we take the automated part of mobility out of it and look at connected, pretty much all of our journeys are connected at the moment because we have a smartphone in our pocket and we're already making informed decisions. Thinking about the safety element as well in terms of transport, you're getting pinged if you go over a speed limit. You're told about where there's road closures and you're rerouting. It's taking the stress out of some of the journey management that's in that already anyway. Platforms like ourselves can enable that as well in terms of real-time data updates. So there's there's less surprises on the road network for people to get worried or concerned or stressed about. I know that was something that we were talking about earlier on in terms of the future for me is definitely to have 100% adoption in terms of the automation, because you're removing a human element of doubt or risk or conflict and confrontation within that, and it has the ability for that to be smooth. I think the digital twin element in terms of the road rules will help with that, because it will unlock more potential for new entrants into the market rather than just using Waymo's approach. If there is a defined set of rules, be it by the CDS specification that has been spoken about first thing this morning, with Dylan and with Akshay this morning, in terms of what that can mean, I think that is the next step for me in terms of really realising and getting new entrants into the market and getting wider adoption beyond just Waymo or others in that space. So I don't think we're far away.
Artie, I know car collisions are much more frequent than cargo ship collisions, but marine safety is certainly a concern. Where I live in South Florida, we have, the constant presence of drunken pleasure boat operators causing fatalities and other disasters. But even in commercial shipping, you have the occasional bridge collision or a ship running aground. Generally, those are human errors. How far are we from eliminating that as a concern?
Well, the maritime industry is a very old industry. There are still terminals operating today where you're using paper bills of lading and marine clerks are stamping them, and this data doesn't just exist in a separate data system with a separate vendor, it exists in a file drawer somewhere. So we're making a lot of progress, but, you'll forgive me, we like to use a lot of bad puns in the maritime industry, but, when it takes a long time to turn a big boat, right? You can't just turn it very quickly. We are making a lot of progress, but when you think about the number of partners that have to be integrated, if you're really talking about eliminating all human error from, the point somebody clicks buy now to it showing up on your doorstep, that's a lot of different partners, a lot of different governmental entities, a lot of planning organizations that need to be involved in order to integrate all of that from soup to nuts and get to the point where everything can move very seamlessly. So what we're focused on at the port is what's in our control. Who are the relationships that we have, the stakeholders that we have, whether it's our customers, our tenants, the governmental partners that we work with, to try to figure out where those barriers are and where we can start to make some immediate progress. And for us, it really goes back to the supply chain crisis, because that was such a stress test of our systems that it exposed all these cracks are, and we know where some of the low-hanging fruit is, and that's where we've really been able to make some progress. The last Department of Transportation stood up a program called Project Flow in the wake of the supply chain crisis. And the goal of this project was to take all of was to get buy-in from partners, port authorities, the shipping lines, terminal operators, get access to that data and build a predictive system that could tell you when is a port going to see a big surge in cargo? Can we see that coming using data from customs, from orders, and manage that better so that we can then figure out how to react? And they've built a pretty good system right now, and we have a lot of partners that you can reliably get that indicator when that warning light is going to flash. But once that warning light flashes, there's no automated next step. It is, okay, let's all have a conversation and figure out how we deal with this now that we know that this is potentially coming. So figuring out how to get from that next step, from that one step where we can diagnose problems early by integrating all of the data that we have. We do this locally with the Port Optimizer, which is our port community system. We pull together data from the trucking companies, the terminals, the two Western railroads, to give us real-time data on dwell times. And if we see those spiking up where our rail car dwell is going up, that's like, we've got a fever, we've got a symptom here, and we need to figure out how we're going to address this. So getting from that, taking our data and use as a diagnostic tool to actually a problem-solving tool, that's really the next big hump that I think we need to get over as an industry.
All right. I like that. Although it didn't sound as optimistic as the first two answers. about eliminating the human error. So, Francisco, something optimistic?
So I'm a little more pragmatic about this. I'm still very optimistic about it. As individuals, agencies, companies start implementing more automation to reduce some of the human error that takes place inherently, I think we'll get close to that point. I don't think it'll ever be eradicated, simply from the perspective of even if you're automating, even if you're using artificial intelligence, there was still a human in the loop on the back end. And unless you get to the point where now, Skynet has taken over and it's thinking for itself, where technically it's removing the human error, I don't know if we'll ever get there. But that being said, and I'll give some credit to Dylan from this morning's session, it's not about being perfect. It's about being really, really good. And I think if we get to the point where we're comfortable with that, the advancements that we'll make just by moving forward instead of being paralyzed because we can't get out of our own way, I think you'll just see a tremendous amount of advancement from that. Is that optimistic?
Yes,
All right,
it's
there.
a lot to get excited about. All right, so Artie, you talked about the lessons learned from the crisis. Tell us what you actually did. What did you deploy in order to change the outcome in your second busiest year? And how did that deployment go? How did it work? And where is it going from here?
Sure. So one of the so we have a port community system at Port of Los Angeles called the Port Optimizer, and this is a great tool. Anybody can go online actually and sign up for an account and Google it. You can get our daily signal email. Well, you'll see predictive numbers based on customs data and data from the shipping line showing how many ships that we're anticipating coming in, what our volumes are going to be. You can get real-time data on the dwell times for trucks and trains. And this data visibility was really critical to us diagnosing some of the problems that we saw during the pandemic. And the best example that we saw was we were looking at our container dwell times. And what that means is the amount of time that a shipping container gets offloaded from a cargo vessel and then stays on the marine terminal. So obviously when there's a lot of congestion, that number is going up. They're staying there longer, there's not enough trucks, there's not enough chassis, there's not enough rail cars, and so that number goes up. But we noticed in looking at that data that there was this tipping point where most cargo was staying longer, but it was eventually picking up. But if a shipping container stayed for more than 8 days, it was going to stay for 30 or 40 days. And one of the problems that we're blessed with at the port is that we don't have a lot of space. We're meant to be a transit facility. We're not meant to be a warehouse. Cargo is supposed to come in, get picked up, and then taken to a warehouse or taken to its final point of rest. So that insight, we were able to diagnose the problem, which is we learned that a lot of our container terminals had in their contracts with their customers, the cargo owners, essentially a warehousing clause where they were trying to compete for each other's business, and they were saying to their customers, hey, you can leave your cargo here for as long as you want. And normally that's not, it's nice to have. You're not really going to use it. You want to get your cargo to your warehouse. But when they didn't have any room in their warehouses, they were like, we can use the Port of LA as their warehouse. So once we diagnosed that problem with that data, we used our tariff to put a fee on cargo that was staying for more than 8 days. We never had to actually charge any customer that fee, because just the threat of it was enough for all of the cargo owners to start moving their cargo off of our docks. And so eventually we repealed it. We realized we didn't need it anymore. But using data to implement policy like that was our most effective way. And again, the other big change that we made was working with the Marine Exchange. We realized that there was a reason that all these ships were backed up offshore. It's because you had to get to the port before you could put in an order for labor with the longshore workers. So all of the shipping lines were steaming across the Pacific as fast as possible. dropping anchor and then burning their engine and waiting because they were in the line for labor. So we were able to work with the Marine Exchange, with the PMSA, which is the trade association that represents all the shipping lines, design and implement a new system, take away that incentive for ships to steam over. And again, we had no ships backed up online or backed up offshore during the last crisis. So it really those those two changes alone, I think, were responsible for a lot of what we're seeing this year as opposed to last 5 years ago.
And can you see any off-port application for similar technology? In the curb space or parking lot environment or an airport environment?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the great thing about the port optimizer is it gives you that window into the future. You're not waiting for the ship to arrive to know, how many boxes are on it, where they're eventually going, are they leaving by truck or by rail? We know that now 40 days in advance. So you can start planning all of these things that much further out, and that cascades all the way up through the supply chain. So all of our customers, the port optimizer is all this aggregate data, but there actually is customer-specific data. If you know your container number, you can plug that into our port optimizer track and trace and see all of that data. Your trucking company has access to all that data as they're planning their routes. They know earlier, so they can plan to make double moves. So we're getting less trucks off the road. You don't have a truck going in without a container and just picking one up, and then another one, leaving with only a box on it. So all of this visibility that we now have through our port community system just makes it possible for all of our supply chain partners to get access to all that information earlier and streamline their operations in advance.
Excellent. Kome, I'd like you to sort of take the same thing. If you've seen some very successful deployment, either in your agency or one of your constituent agencies recently, I'd like you to kind of walk us through how that developed and how it's working.
Yeah, when we talk about data, you mentioned earlier on that talking about data was not sexy, but for the work that we do, data is all about everything being sexy in the work that we do. If I could overuse the word sexy on the stage. And the reason I say that is just from what Artie just described, there was a time we didn't know what was on a ship until it showed up. And then we scrambled and whatever came off the ship, and you try to, but now you got enough information. Once the ship is loaded, you know exactly what's on it. That's a whole set of data that we didn't have before. In our case, one of the things that we've been able to do that I think is very important and instructive, and would like to do more of it, is be able to, for context, we have 191 cities in the SCAG region. Most of them do not have capacity to go out and procure their own data. And so SCAG as an aggregate has been able to do some of that. Being able to bring streetlight data, the Insight program for our cities that don't have the capacity, I think has been very helpful. I was looking at the recent use of the streetlight data that we have. We have about almost 100 jurisdictions that are using it. They've done almost 7,000 analytic work on that data. And what is that? It's decision support. They're using that data to make decisions locally for where things go, whether it's mobility, whether it's land use. These are actionable events that are happening all across the region from that one data source. When you think about, I think curb management has been talked about. The curb is one of the most valuable pieces of real estate in any one jurisdiction that's so undervalued. We did an extensive curb management study at SCAG. One, to just highlight the fact that there's something called curbs that you need to be mindful of. We tend to just relegate it to parking. And yet it has implications for freight delivery. It has implications for different kinds of activation, whether it's restaurants and farmers markets. There's so many things that are happening that could happen on the curb with the curbside that I think is undervalued. As we look at the events coming to us in the region, like the World Cup, this Super Bowl, the Olympics, the curb space in the streets, the curb space in the cities are very much in play for active transportation, bike and ped activities, but maybe just festival hubs, mobility hubs. So these are things that data allows us to be able to really enhance our ability to make those decisions. And there are three aspects to it. One is there's the collaborative nature. When you bring data to the table and show people where things really are, there's a tendency to pay attention and want to be part of the decision making. When you then do the analysis based on that data and you're able to visualize it and show through some visualization tools what this looks like real time, what it looks like potentially, you begin to get a better understanding. We live in a society that's not autocratic. Well, we live in a society that's not autocratic. I'm going to say it again. We live in a society that's not autocratic. I say it 3 times. Because we live in a democratic environment where we can't just make decisions at the local level without input from folks that are affected by it. However magnanimous and benevolent you might be as a planner or a leader, elected leader, you don't know what the people want until the people participate. And I think data allows us to have that. So one of the areas that excites me about this whole conversation about data is just the ability to bring people together around data to allow us to make decisions, to be more inclusive in decision making, and be able to get the best out of the work that we're doing at the municipal level.
Remind me to come back to the use of traffic light data in land use, maybe street light data, because I'm very curious about that. But I want to ask the other panelists the same essential question. Mike, can you tell us about your specific experience in cities like Birmingham and Halifax, where you've done deployments, and what success looks like in those situations? Tell us specifically what was implemented in those examples and then how it succeeded.
Yeah, sure. In that space, in terms of to follow on from what you were saying, Kame, in terms of the curb space being something that is underappreciated in that sense, that is something that we realised with our smart parking technology and deployments. We've been doing that for a number of years now. What we were able to demonstrate in terms of real success in that sense, and it was a myth-busting exercise where data helped us in what that would look like, in terms of we fundamentally changed the way in which people would interact with a curbside for parking, moved it to a pay-by-minute setup. We were able to create through IoT sensing live data on occupancy and put that in people's hands. So to use that as an example, we have with our app, people were able to plan their journeys, be able to plan where they were going to, where they would normally park. They could see before they got there that it was full. So rather than circling around waiting for their favorite parking spot to open up, they realized there was one around the corner that they could just easily go and park in and use. They were also able to extend that session or their parking session without even realizing they were extending the parking session, because the sensor in the bay was able to just stopped and charged for the time that somebody was using that space as they left. So it was frictionless in that sense. Businesses thought that it was going to change how things were going to work, that people would be there less, they would just hop in and hop out again. The opposite happened. People wanted to stay longer because they didn't have the stress of thinking that their parking session was going to run out. They thought, oh, well, it doesn't. I'll stay for another coffee. I'll go and visit another shop and I will extend my stay by 10 minutes because I'm only going to have to pay for an extra 10 minutes, not an extra hour. And we was also able to demonstrate the value to the city as well, that we're able to see in this location, since we deployed this new service, the revenue on this street has gone up. The occupancy might have turned over more quickly, but more people were using that space. So there was more money going through the city's revenue streams, but also the businesses were able to benefit from that because their footfall was actually increasing in that sense. And we were able, this was qualitative data rather than quantitative in that sense. But the research that we did with a number of our app users was that they were traveling less within the city. So they reduced the number of miles that they were driving. So there was a an element in terms
Because
of
it was easier to
sustainability.
park.
It was easier to find parking.
So they weren't
easier to
cruising
go
for
through.
a
weren't cruising
space.
around the city. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a big thing. And have you done anything for people who aren't using an app with just signage?
So the data can be plugged into. So we don't have
You don't do the
signage ourselves,
signage.
but the data that is created can absolutely be plugged into real time. Proprietary signing that can come through, because it can just be fed through via an API into the relevant signing to show people what is available in a given area.
Yeah, I wish those worked better, but my experience with them in Miami Airport and any major mall is that they always direct you to a row where there are no spaces, or it's not really a space. It's like two giant trucks have the two spaces, and then there's a sliver in between that you couldn't even fit a motorcycle in. Anyway, Francisco, what does a successful deployment look like to you? And or maybe you can cite an example.
Sure. So we've done some work. I can't mention the customer, but large city, working with their transit system, and in essence, providing them with the platform to improve reliability on real-time data, and also from a predictive analytics perspective. So looking at it from being able to predict maintenance windows for the transit system, and then also being able to provide information back out to customers on when the trains were going to arrive, if they were going to arrive late, if something was down, if they needed to take a different stop or a detour. And so we've seen significant benefit for that particular customer, where customer satisfaction obviously went up. For us, it's how is it, we don't have a specific solution. We're not an end user solution. For us, it's the underlying platform that supports, and to utilize sort of the verbiage that Koma used earlier, we empower and our users, our customers, on being able to deliver the services that they're trying to deliver. And that's where a lot of our success has come from. It's understanding what it is that they're trying to do. For us, it's very much along the lines of improving citizen services and the delivery of those services, regardless of the agency, and whether that's within healthcare and benefits or transit. That's where we've seen a lot of success.
So I want to follow up on that, and I'm going to come back to the issue of land use decisions, but I'm very curious as to, we've talked about mobility and about, goods and people being delivered and those types of logistics, but where are we going in terms of other quality of life issues? And these data policies and these utilization, these use cases, getting to these other quality of life issues, the one that comes to mind most immediately that just seems to always be an issue in every municipal election where I live is the slowness of permitting. And, that's something that I have a client that has a solution. For whatever reason, it's taking a while to get it fielded, but I'm curious about that. So permitting, but also, and maybe that leads to the issue of housing, which is the other really big issue for so many urban areas. Certainly in Los Angeles, you've got an overwhelming demand for affordable housing that just isn't being met. And every time you hear a number, it's just some impossible number to meet. So how are we using data solutions to improve the process of creating more housing?
So I can definitely talk about the permitting issue. So
that would help, certainly.
Yeah, so we're currently working right now with several municipalities that have seen upwards of $250 million worth of revenue shortfall because of permitting. And, I never, in covering this space for a very long time, I always used to answer, we're not revenue generators in state and local government. That's not what we do. But in the reality is, when you look at taxes, it's revenue, right? Yeah. And so that sort of opened up the aperture for us, because what you started to see was the trickle effect and the impact, the negative impact of not being able to deliver a simple permit. And that's everything from whether it was housing permits for construction, if they wanted to open up a hot dog cart, if they wanted to become a security guard. That entire process was taking over 360 days just to get approved. And so and now what we're finding is, and so they were able to reduce that without our help initially to 180 days, which you would say, that's great. No, it's not, right? It's still too long.
It's less bad.
It's less bad. That's a good way to put it. But the other thing that a lot of state and local governments are doing is they're now putting additional pressure on a system that can't deliver on the promise of getting you a permit sooner now, but they're now giving refunds. So if they don't get you the permit within 60 or 90 days, they will refund you your money. So the impetus is now how can you drastically change that process? So this is where we believe, one, the data, the quality of the data is going to be critical. The skills gap associated with staff understanding the technologies they need to implement is going to be critical. And starting to look at things like artificial intelligence to provide that boost on at least automating much of the process, not removing the human from the loop, so as that final check to move things forward, but at least to get past the biggest obstacles, which is just validating that all of the information that has been implemented to start off the process and the countdown has been validated before they hit the obstacle. So that is where, this is why data is the new hotness, right? Or data is the new bacon. I've seen that before too, for those of you that like bacon. Making sure that the policies are in place, and I'm going to say that again because I think a lot of people look at this as a technology issue. It is not technology. The technology is there to provide you. You were just saying you're working with someone that has a technology that could fix it, right?
That's what they say.
I will guarantee you that the reason why it's not getting visibility is because many state, local governments don't even know where to start because they don't have the policies in place to understand the implications of implementing that technology within the municipality. And so a lot of the discussions that we're having is, do you have a data governance policy in place? Have you identified all the stakeholders? Are you doing stakeholder buy-in to make sure that you're educating those owners of the data, the stewards of the data, on what is going to take place so that when you're looking at implementing it, they've already bought in. A lot of the pushback that occurs with some of these new technologies is that people just fear what they don't know and they have not been introduced to what you're looking to implement.
So one of the objections to increasing density in urban and suburban areas is always the amount of additional car trips. Are we at the point, given the data that you were talking about, the streetlight data and things like that, that we don't need to rely on the developer's traffic study or the city's traffic study, but we have real data that proves or disproves the questions that are raised by residents when additional density is proposed, and can maybe overcome those concerns using the data to better manage the space, the right-of-way?
You're looking at me.
I'm looking at you first. Yes.
Well, I'm going to take a step back because I think the issue of when we talk about permit streamlining, I think it's more of a symptom. There's a huge regulatory overhang on local jurisdictions that go beyond just permitting. It's getting them being responsible in California. A city is the lead agency under CEQA. So for every land development, the city is in charge of being able to prove to everybody that this particular project is going to be okay. It's not going to be detrimental to life as we know it. And in doing that, obviously the developer is paying the bill for it, but that process is so laden with with conflict, that it then costs a lot of money. And so it creates the opportunity for cities to then need to charge, huge fees. We've estimated the fee charged on housing in parts of California upwards of $100,000, $120,000 per unit. So you can imagine that that's tacked on to what people then have to pay for housing. So that's a compounding element to the housing crisis that we already have. I agree that technology is not the problem here. I think there is a policy issue that we need to face up to generally, and I think the state legislature has tried to do that by passing so many laws on housing and trying to streamline housing. And yet, I think in some cases, some of those laws have complicated the process even more so. So I think there is a policy overhang that we're dealing with that's costing us anyway in terms of permitting. We worked, as an example, when we were coming out of COVID, one of the big pushes that came to our doorstep at SCAG was to work on broadband and bring broadband to the last bit of last mile where broadband wasn't attainable, because these are low resource communities, these are low resource addresses. The fiber works through them, but it doesn't connect to those addresses. And the question is, how do you make that happen so that we can close that gap, the 10% gap? How do we close that digital divide, as it's called? A lot of it had to do with permitting, because each ISP, each internet service provider, had to go through every single city and get permitted. And so as they're going through each city, the permitting requirements are different. Somewhere you could come in and cut through the pavement. Other places you can't. You got to pay fees to do this. You got to pay fees to do that. And so, one of the things that we find was a niche point for us at SCAG was to coordinate the permitting in the areas that were willing to cooperate on that. And we were able to put together a kind of a model ordinance for cities to adopt that made sure that permitting was streamlined, and the ISPs had one rule to follow as the line cuts through multiple jurisdictions. And so the technology is not the issue. It's just a policy overhang that we need to address. And I'm not sure that we have enough technology or data to overcome that, quite frankly, because it's more of a political will and having folks come to terms with what we're trying to solve for.
Okay, we're at about 10 minutes to go. So before I go on and ask any more questions, I want to see if anybody from the audience wants to ask a question. If you don't, that's fine, because I've got more questions. But does anybody in the audience have a burning question that they would like to ask? Because this has been a very spicy panel, and I know you all are going to need some water and white bread to be able to swallow all this. If there are no questions, I'm going to go on. Artie, you've been very successful in accessing federal funding for other very important priorities here in Southern California. I'm thinking specifically about housing. What do you think is the picture? What does it look like going forward in terms of accessing government funding sources for the implementations of the solutions that we've been talking about?
Well, I think the government's about to be funded, so that'll be a good start. We'll get the spigot turned on a little bit. But I think generally the outlook for solutions like these is good, even in the current political climate. I mentioned Project Flow at the beginning, even though that was a Biden administration initiative that was started under them. The current administration has seen the value there that it's providing and is continuing that and wants to keep pushing it forward. So I do think there's, even though this current administration's posture is, they with the tariffs and everything and wanting to incentivize domestic manufacturing. So for, a port that is responsible for 30 to 40% of the country's imports, it's not necessarily the greatest posture we would like to see. They do care a lot about supply chain resilience and technology and those types of things. So I do think that we'll see some continued investment in things like data support for things like Project Flow. Where we're going to see a pullback, unfortunately, is on the environmental side of things. We're not going to see a ton of investments in, coming through the EPA, like the Port of LA was successful in securing over $400 million to support our terminals and our community in deploying more zero emission equipment, which, we were talking about traffic and kind of some of the pushback to housing. Well, a lot of the resistance that we have in our community is because the port is responsible, and its tenants, we've got a lot of diesel burning equipment down at the port.
Right.
And so in addition to the truck traffic, which is a problem that we're hoping that data can help us solve, we need data and technology and moving to zero emissions for not just trucks, but the ships and cargo handling equipment and trains, all of that stuff. That's where we're going to be looking towards local solutions, towards state programs. The state budget's not in a good place, but maybe some local funding. We have our Clean Truck program at the Port of LA that helps us invest in things like that. So it's going to be a little bit of a mixed bag, I guess, is what I'm saying from our priorities.
Okay. All right. Mike, I'm sorry, I forgot what I was going to ask you. But I want to, again, focus on implementation and what you see as the barriers to implementation and to really making the kinds of improvements that that you're capable of making at the street level.
Yeah, sure. In terms of it, the street level, part of that could come down to funding, but part of it could be just a realization that scale is possible. Sometimes there is a sense of fear or reluctance that things can't scale. Now I'm going to point at Dylan again. So this morning there was that question in terms of the phased approach, the smart grant funding that you've secured is enabling you to do that with less fear because it's not relying on operational budgets. So if there is support from other jurisdictions, be it from federal funding or from groups such as yourself in terms of enabling that piece, as you've described already, I think that is part of the approach to take in terms of that kind of breaking a barrier down, but actually helping people to realize that scale is possible. Scale is something that can be delivered. Now, a sort of a loop or a POC, proof of concept loop is something that you can get bogged down in. So we did a proof of concept with New York City DOT across the last year or so. We met all of the targets that were put to us. Now, there are things that do get put in place. The mayoral elections have sort of paused the process, and we're not sure yet what the priorities are going to look like. But for me, it's that piece of if you're going to go through a proof of concept, have mechanisms in place to then realize once that proof of concept has been proven, to then take it to that next step. Sometimes that might come down to funding, like Dylan, you've described this morning in terms of the mechanisms are there to do that, but there are absolutely suppliers out there who can help with that process and deliver it. Take that burden away from cities and DOTs and deliver with their expertise, really, in that sense.
So you've got a vision problem in terms of the ability to envision the macro, and then you mentioned the funding. Can the funding be shifted to the commercial users?
I think in some ways
benefit the most from from the gained efficiencies.
Yeah, and that model could well come through in terms of it being a self-funded model as well. But going back to a point that you made earlier on as well, Kome, in terms of similar in the UK, lots of funding can be attracted to the stuff that you can see, touch, and feel. So bridges and everything like that. But in terms of actually stepping back and realising how many more bridges do we need to go and build, or dare I say it, maintain? I mean, we do want to maintain the bridges. Yeah. But in terms of redirecting some of the resource that is already there into creating things like digital twins so you can understand the network better, make it more resilient, make it more predictable, so you haven't got to build as much infrastructure tomorrow. Understand what you're up to today and then reassess and reevaluate.
Kome?
We've actually found that I think the idea of scale makes a lot of sense. We do this quick builds now as part of our portfolio at SCAG, where we work with cities to just put something on the ground that begins to implement, and then you can scale it and get it bigger over time. But it allows folks to, and we have a long history on this with our Go Human campaign, where we're able to go into a community over the weekend and put out some kit of parts that would demonstrate what a pedestrian or a bicycle facility might look like, or a parklet. And then, over the course of a couple of weeks, people try it out. That does more for the community than any well-designed engineering drawings about the same thing. And so we've been able to get that to then get decisions made quickly to implement. We're using quick builds now to do the same thing, where a little bit of resources go out and build a certain part of the community along the curbside to show and plant in place a facility that's going to be there for the rest of the time.
Okay, lightning round, 2 questions in 3 minutes, very quick answers. One policy change you would like to see that would help. Government policy change.
I would like to see more data sharing, remove the obstacles between data sharing between public and private.
Okay. Artie.
You kind of stole my answer.
You can have the same answer, but you just have to make yours a little spicier.
Maybe not data sharing, but maybe the government should start making some decisions about types of data, data standards, data quality, and giving us the playbook to run with.
Data quality. I like that.
Similar theme from me, really, a mandated adoption of data standards, be it for curbside or road rule management from my side of things, or port controls.
Come in.
And I agree with all of that. I think data governance is a great thing. We need to have that anyway. But I think we need investment in the digital infrastructure space, period. You know, we do a lot of funding for highways and bridges, and we buy buses and we buy train sets and do all those things. We don't put money into the things that make those things all work together, which is the fiber and the data sets and the data quality that comes with it. Having a set program for digital infrastructure, I think, is a big deal.
Last question. What do you want folks to take away from today's discussion? Artie.
I think we're making a lot of progress, really, at the end of the day. It's exciting time to be in this industry. It's exciting to talk to people at this conference, to see all the exciting solutions, and go sign up for Port Optimizer Signal daily email and see some of the data that we're working with every day.
It actually does sound fascinating, and I'm going to do it. Francisco.
With all the doom and gloom that we get to see on the news on a daily basis, I'm actually quite optimistic that the goodness in people will actually get us through this. And so we're really at the precipice of making some really big advancements in just mobility, in the supply chains, and just overall transformation.
Kome.
Well, if you take nothing else away from this, data is sexy and spicy.
Mike.
I can't say much more than that, but in terms of taking away from the session, I'm not sure. But if you want to take some of these socks away with you, I might be able to. I do have a couple more
I need some
on the
yellow
stand.
socks with pink bullets on them. I want to thank you guys for sharing. This was great experience for me working with you to prepare and speaking with you today. I want to thank everybody who sat and listened and enjoyed this conversation. I want to thank the people at CoMotion who set this up and just let us walk on stage and make it all seem seamless. And I want to just say, I didn't introduce myself at first. I'm Mitch Bierman. I'm a lawyer and a government affairs consultant in Miami. If you are not in South Florida yet, what is keeping you? Everybody else is there. Come to South Florida. Call me. I will make everything work smoothly for you there and make sure that you have the best possible experience in our community. And thank you again for coming, and thank you, CoMotion.